What if after death, a person does not end up in heaven or hell at all, but instead finds themselves in a place they created throughout their entire life? What if most people, after death, become stuck in the first heavy levels of the afterlife and do not even realize that they have already died? Edgar Cayce claimed exactly this. According to him, death does not automatically free a person. It merely removes the outer shell and leaves the soul face to face with what it became on earth. Cayce said that the afterlife is neither chaos nor a myth. It is a strictly ordered system of levels where each soul is drawn to what it internally corresponds to. No judges, no sentences. A person determines their place not at the moment of death but over years, action by action, thought by thought. The lowest and most widespread level Cayce called the borderline state. According to him, this is where the majority of the deceased end up. This layer looks almost like the earthly world, but as if dimmed, washed out, stripped of living colors. There is no familiar flow of time there. Souls wander through familiar places, unaware that the body has already died. A person can see their own home, the street, relatives, but cannot touch them or be heard. At this level, people continue to worry about money, property, unfinished business. They become angry, anxious, try to fix something, but each time encounter emptiness. According to Cayce, this is precisely where stories about restless spirits and sensations of someone's presence originate. These are not demons. These are souls that were unable to let go of earthly life. To avoid becoming stuck here, Cayce emphasized that a person must learn to let go while still alive. Those who identified themselves with things, status, power, or the body continue to cling to them after death, thereby holding themselves in this gray space. Those who understood the temporary nature of everything earthly pass through this layer almost instantly. Above lies a heavier and darker level. It is not filled with fire or monsters, as depicted in religious images, but it feels oppressive and dense. This space is saturated with a sense of confinement, inner pressure, and constant tension. According to Cayce, this is where souls are drawn who, during life, carried anger, hatred, rage, and a thirst for revenge. Visually, this layer resembles a foggy, enclosed environment without an open horizon. Everything seems compressed and crushing. A person constantly confronts their own thoughts, which intensify dozens of times over. There are no executioners here. Hatred itself becomes the environment. Cayce said that not a single accumulated emotion disappears after death. Everything a person suppressed or justified comes to the surface. That is why the ability to forgive during life is not a moral ideal, but a practical mechanism for freeing the soul. Lack of forgiveness is not punishment, but a heavy continuation of the same state, only without the distracting factors of the body. There is also another, more insidious level, the level of self-deception. It looks relatively calm. There is no fear or pain here, but there is illusion. Souls create a comfortable reality around themselves in which they are always right, responsibility lies with others, and mistakes seem never to have existed. This space resembles an endless waking dream, where everything feels acceptable and familiar. The danger of this level, according to Cayce, is that all movement comes to a complete stop. A soul may remain here for a very long time, not suffering, but also not developing. It is honesty with oneself, practiced during life, that allows one to bypass this layer. One who learned to look inward without excuses does not need illusions after death. That is why Cayce emphasized that the afterlife does not begin after death. It is formed long before it, in a person's choices, in their thoughts, in how they respond to pain, resentment, and fear. And the first question the soul hears after leaving the body does not sound like a verdict, but like a reflection. Who did you truly become? Above the heavy and confusing layers, according to Edgar Cayce, begins a realm that many people mistake for heaven. But this is not a reward and not a place of eternal bliss. It is a level of awareness and learning. It looks unlike anything a person knew during earthly life. There are no familiar landscapes of earth, but there is a sense of vastness, depth, and clarity. Consciousness seems to expand, and for the first time the soul sees its entire life as a whole, without distortions. At this level, a person does not experience fear. Understanding comes instead. The soul begins to see not only its actions, but also their consequences, how every word affected others, how even fleeting thoughts created chains of events. Cayce emphasized that no one is judged here, but hiding is impossible. Everything is evident, as if lying in the open. Visually, Cayce described this layer as a space of light without a source. The light does not blind but permeates everything around. There are no shadows and no places to hide. For many souls, this becomes the most difficult trial, because during life they were accustomed to justifying themselves, explaining mistakes by circumstances or by someone else's fault. Here that is impossible. The soul sees the truth about itself, and it is precisely this that becomes a turning point. In order not to remain on this level for a long time, Cayce said that a person must develop responsibility while still alive, the ability to acknowledge one's mistakes without self-destruction and without escape. A soul accustomed to telling itself, "I did everything I could even when that is not true," finds itself confused after death. It must relearn honesty. The next layer of the afterlife, Cayce called restorative. It appears softer and calmer. Muted, warm tones prevail here. The space resembles a misty field or a garden filled with a sense of silence. This is a level of rest and healing. Souls who experienced severe trauma are drawn here. Wars, violence, losses, years of fear and pain. It is important to understand that this is not a place for everyone. No one is sent there. The soul itself remains here if it needs recovery. Cayce emphasized that free will operates even here. Some souls accept help, gradually restore their inner wholeness, and move upward. Others continue to hold on to pain as part of their identity. In order not to linger in this layer, a person must learn during life to live through suffering, but not make it the center of their personality. Cayce said that pain, when understood and released, becomes experience. Pain that turns into an excuse or a reason for hardening becomes an anchor. Above this lies the level of conscious service. It is felt differently. The weight of individual experiences disappears here. Souls retain clear awareness and an understanding of what they are doing and why. This space does not resemble a temple or a radiant kingdom. Rather, it feels like a state of inner focus and quiet strength. Cayce asserted that such souls acted during life not out of fear and not out of a desire for reward. They helped because they could not do otherwise. And this state naturally continues after death. These souls are able to help others, to guide and support those who are passing through heavier levels. But even this is not the final point. Cayce emphasized that the afterlife is not a staircase with a last floor. It is a process. The soul either moves or becomes delayed, and movement is always connected with inner growth and understanding. He especially noted that there is no sense in fearing death if a person fears not death itself, but a meeting with oneself. Everything that seems frightening in the afterlife is, in essence, an intensified reflection of earthly life. That is why preparation for the transition begins not at the moment of departure, but in the choices a person makes every day, in honesty, in the ability not to harden one's heart, and in the ability to see in other people not enemies, but fellow travelers on their own path. Cayce said that the higher a person's inner level during life, the fewer surprises await them after death. For such a person, the afterlife does not feel alien. It is perceived as a continuation of a journey that began long before the final breath. The highest levels of the afterlife, according to Edgar Cayce, are almost impossible to describe in human language. Here, familiar images, forms, and even the sense of time disappear. The soul no longer feels like a separate figure moving from one point to another. Instead, a state of complete understanding arises, as if all answers exist simultaneously. There are no thoughts, there is knowledge, there are no questions, there is clarity. Cayce emphasized that it is precisely on these levels that it becomes evident that earthly life was never accidental. Neither suffering nor joy nor encounters happened for no reason. The soul clearly sees which lessons it was meant to learn, where it avoided them, where it was afraid, and where it showed courage. This understanding does not cause pain, but it can give rise to profound regret, not because of punishment, but because of missed opportunities. It is here that many souls feel a desire to return, not because it is bad there, but because an awareness arises of how much could have been done differently. Cayce said that reincarnation is not chance and not a sentence. The soul itself makes the decision to return, choosing the conditions that will help it continue to develop. Family, country, era, even hardships. All of this is not accidental, but a conscious choice. But it is important to understand the main point. According to Cayce, far from every soul is ready for a rapid transition to these levels. Most people create their path while still alive, and this path is not determined by religion, rituals, or words. It is shaped by everyday decisions, how a person acts when no one is watching, how they justify themselves, how they respond to injustice and pain. Cayce warned that the heaviest burden after death is not mistakes, but the hardening of the heart. A soul accustomed to despising, humiliating, or considering itself above others finds itself, after leaving the body, in a state of isolation. This is not a hell of fire, but an emptiness without love. A person seems to continue existing in a world where only their own voice can be heard. There is only one way to avoid this, to develop compassion and inner honesty while still alive. Not performative kindness, but the ability to see in other people not enemies or tools, but living beings with their own paths. Cayce said that a soul that learned compassion during life does not feel loneliness after death. He also emphasized that fear of death is a symptom. A person fears not non-existence but the loss of control. The stronger the attachment to the material, the more painful the transition. And conversely, one who saw the meaning of life not only in accumulation, but in growth and helping others, experiences not an end but a liberation after death. According to Cayce, the afterlife does not punish and does not reward. It reflects. It amplifies what a person has become. That is why preparation for death does not begin in old age, not on the deathbed and not in last-minute prayers. It begins in how a person lives every day, which thoughts they allow, which decisions they make, and which feelings they cultivate within themselves. Cayce concluded his descriptions with a simple but frighteningly honest conclusion. A person is already creating their posthumous state right now, and if during life they chose honesty, responsibility, and mercy, then there is no terrifying afterlife for them. There is only the continuation of the path, without illusions but also without fear.